From homeless to millionaire, the inspiring story of a black man. They say you can spot a millionaire by his car, his watch, or the glass tower he calls home. But what if the richest man you've never heard of lived on the street just last year? What if his story started with broken dreams and ended in a world no one expected? This is Samuel's story, a black man with ragged clothes, tired eyes, and a past so tangled it sounds like fiction. They called him a mystery because no one knew where he came from or how he spoke not just one, but 9 languages. 9! Most people can barely learn 1. Edward was a man who lived behind steel gates and marble floors. A businessman drowning in money, but starved for meaning. His life was polished and cold, his world wide but shallow. Then, one chilly morning in the city's forgotten alley, Edward saw Samuel crouched by the fire, speaking softly to a little boy who didn't speak at all. The boy was his son, Luke, silent, trapped in a world where words didn't come easy. But with Samuel, Luke was different. He was alive, laughing. Whispers in French, German, Mandarin spills from his lips like magic. What stopped Edward wasn't the wonder in his son's eyes. It was the man teaching him. Samuel, a homeless stranger with steady hands. And a voice calm as a river, but fierce beneath the surface. Fear gnawed at Edward's chest, tight and suffocating. Anger flickered in his gut like a sudden flame. How could this ragged man teach his son what he couldn't? Who was he to touch their perfect, ordered world? He shoved past his unease. Samuel had to go. But when Edward confronted him, the unexpected hit like a punch. Samuel wasn't just a wanderer. He was a man chased from love, crushed by secrets no one else could bear. Hidden beneath his rough skin was a lifetime of battles, lost families, betrayals, and a story so closely tied to Edward's own family. It shook the foundation of everything he believed. Questions flooded Edward's mind. How could he cast this man away when everything inside screamed to listen? The city outside their walls roared with inequality and silence. But inside that bubble, walls began to crack. Edward's fingers trembled when Samuel revealed a truth that threatened to tear their worlds apart. A link, unexpected and fragile, that tied them together like threads tangled in pain and hope. Could Edward risk everything to help? To lift Samuel out of shadows, to let Luke find his voice across borders and languages? Or would fear chain him to the safety he knew? The choice burned like fire in his chest. The street's cold wind howled outside the mansions. Grand windows as Edward stood, caught between what he thought he knew and the harsh reality breathing beside him. The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. What secret does Samuel hide that connects him to Edward's past? And will their fragile new bond survive the fierce storm ahead? The city holds its breath. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without notice. Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, drop a powerful like. That really helps me with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Edward's breath hitched as he took in Samuel's words. He felt a tight knot in his chest, the intertwining of fear and curiosity forming a vice grip around his heart. His mind raced, battling against the urge to push this man out, to return to the comfort of ignorance. But Samuel was still there, eyes shining like lanterns in the dark, whispering truths. Ha ha ha! That sounded too perilous to bear. A sudden crash rang through the pristine air. Edward jumped, heart pounding. The sound came from the front of the mansion. He glanced back at Samuel, whose expression shifted from calm to alert, tension rippling through him like a shockwave. "What was that?" Edward whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. Before Samuel could respond, panic-stricken yells erupted from outside. "Help! Somebody, please!" The cries were urgent, palpable. Edward rushed to the window, heart racing, shoulders taut. The usual tranquility of his world shattered like glass. He peered out and saw a crowd gathering, faces twisted in shock. People pointed, gasps mingling with frantic conversations, filling the cold air. As he turned to Samuel, he noticed the man was already on his feet. Determination etched across his face. "Wait here," Samuel urged, but the urgency in his voice didn't allow Edward to comply. They both stepped outside into the chaos. The morning air turned sharp against their skin. Just beyond the gate, a woman lay on the ground, her body crumpled at an awkward angle, arms strewn around her like broken branches. Panic clutched Edward's throat. "What happened?" he shouted, pushing through the throng, anxious voices rising around him. "Car accident!" someone yelled, pointing toward the street. Edward followed the line of sight and saw headlights gleaming amidst a jumble of twisted metal. A vehicle had crashed, smoke billowing from its hood. Dread knotted in Edward's stomach like a coiled snake. Samuel moved with the crowd, reaching the fallen woman, whose face was pale, eyes fluttering. Edward stayed back, watching Samuel lean down, murmuring something softly. The calmness in Samuel's voice cut through the chaos. He seemed to cradle her, grounding her to reality. But then, out of nowhere, a figure emerged from the crowd. A man stormed forward, face flushed with fury. "That's my sister!" he bellowed, eyes wild. "What did you do?" He glared at Samuel, fists clenched, the crowd falling silent, tension crackling like electricity. In that moment, Samuel looked up, panic flickering in his eyes. "I'm trying to help," he pleaded, but the anger in the man's gaze didn't waver. Edward felt the air shrink around them, cold and oppressive. Then, like a trigger pulled, the man lunged, grabbing Samuel's collar. "You stay away from her," he shouted, voice shaking with rage. Samuel stumbled back, his calm facade shattering. Edward's heart raced as he leaped forward. Stop! Let him go! Before he could reach them, a woman screeched, darting out of the crowd. Simon, don't hurt him! He's trying to save her! Her voice rang with desperation. Edward froze, realizing the woman was the sister, the one lying there, barely breathing. The revelation pierced through him like a jagged knife. Suddenly, everything crashed down around him. The connection between Samuel and the woman, the intensity in their faces. Memories flicked in Edward's mind, shadows of a past he thought he knew. His heart raced as he witnessed Samuel hold the man's gaze, a flicker of recognition passing between them. His pulse thudded loudly in his ears. What had Samuel hidden? In this moment, everything unravelled before Edward's eyes. The mysteries twisted around them were tightening into a noose. How could Samuel be tied to this woman? What if Samuel's secret, the one that shook him to his core, was about to come crashing down like the wreckage on the street? The truth glared at him from every angle. As the crowd shifted and murmurs grew louder, Edward felt the weight of the world pressing down. All thoughts of safety vanished in a heartbeat. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The street's cold wind howled outside the mansion's grand windows as Edward stood, caught between what he thought he knew and the harsh reality breathing beside him. The air turned electric, heavy with unsaid words. Samuel, with his tired eyes, seemed to carry the weight of the world, while Edward's heart raced in uncertainty. Then a sudden noise shattered the moment. A loud crash echoed from the front of the mansion, sending shivers down Edward's spine. He turned sharply, adrenaline flooding his system. What was that? He gasped. They both rushed toward the sound, the plush carpet beneath their feet now feeling foreign and absurd. Just as they reached the grand entrance, a group of masked figures burst through the door, their eyes glinting like sharp blades. Edward's heart dropped. "Get down!" Samuel shouted, throwing himself in front of Edward and Luke. A loud bang rang out. And with it, the laughter of the little boy turned to terrified screams that echoed like a thunderclap. In that moment, everything changed. One of the masked men lunged towards Samuel, fingers reaching for something hidden beneath his ragged coat. The raw fear in Edward's chest mixed with confusion. Who were these people? Samuel stood firm, eyes burning. "You don't belong here." But then a voice came from the masked figure, a voice that cut through the chaos like a knife. "Are you still playing the hero, Samuel? After everything?" Edward's pulse quickened. Samuel's face paled, as if a ghost had crossed the threshold. "You don't know what you're doing," Samuel rasped, the calmness breaking like a fragile glass. The intruder stepped forward, pulling down their mask, revealing a familiar face. Edward's jaw dropped. Henry. Henry had been Edward's brother, lost to time, to a rift that had torn their family apart years ago. But why was he here? Anger flickered in Edward's gut, as if ignited by old wounds. "What do you want?" Edward demanded, the words hitting the air heavy with disbelief. "Everything he has," Henry barked, pointing at Samuel. "You don't understand who he really is. He's a thief, a deceiver. He's the reason we lost everything." Shockwaves erupted inside Edward's mind. unraveling the bonds he had just begun to form with Samuel. "No," he whispered. "That can't be true." Samuel stood still as the crowd grew confused. Tension crackling in the heavy air. "Edward, please," Samuel said, voice shaking as fear crept back into his eyes. "I never wanted this life. I just wanted to help you." But another masked figure stepped forward, holding a tattered photo that caught the light. It showed a young Samuel, arms around a group of children who bore striking resemblance to Edward's family. Edward felt his breath catch. "What is that?" The crowd murmured, gasps filling the space. "He's been lying to you," Henry shouted, his eyes wild with accusation. "This man is not who you think he is. He's tied to our past in ways you can't imagine." Everything froze for a heartbeat. Edward's heart raced, caught between trust and betrayal. What dark past stretched beneath this man, who spoke so fluently, who awakened Luke in ways he couldn't? "Stop," Edward said, his voice rising above the chaos. Panic twisted around him, like barbed wire. "Samuel, tell me the truth." Samuel's gaze dropped to the floor, shame crashing over him like heavy waves. The room grew silent, breaths held tight in disbelief. Only the howl of the wind filled the void. "Edward, he began, but was cut off as another shout rang from Henry's lips. "Enough! You can't protect him. The truth will come out, one way or another." The storm outside raged, but inside, every wave of confusion broke against the rocks of reality. Edward stood, hot, hammering, choices pressing down like lead. The city held its breath, yet the truth loomed like a shadow just outside their grasp. Would this revelation tear apart their fragile bond, or was there something more sinister hidden in the depths? The crowd hung in a thick silence, eyes darting among one another, awaiting the next words to break the tension. Edward's heart raced as Samuel opened his mouth, speech faltering on the brink of revelation. "I never wanted this life. I just wanted to help." His voice wavered, hanging in the air like an unspent bullet. But before he could finish, a crackle of static echoed from a nearby police radio. A white and blue flash of lights sliced through the chaos, illuminating Samuel's face, a visage twisted in pain and yearning. Edward felt his chest tighten. What was the truth? And who was Samuel? Really? Then, suddenly, a piercing scream sliced through the air. A woman's voice, filled with raw horror. "Look out!" It came from nowhere, and everyone whipped their heads to see where danger was coming from. Edward felt dread coil in his stomach. In that split second, as if the world were moving in slow motion, another masked figure pushed through the crowd. A huge man, eyes ablaze with rage. He lunged forward, grabbing not Samuel, but Luke, the boy. Edward's heart stopped. "No!" he shouted, desperation fueling his voice. The figure hoisted Luke into the air, the child's terrified screams echoing against the mansion walls. Edward's instincts kicked in, his feet pounding against the marble floor as he raced toward them. Samuel surged with him, fear coursing through him like a lightning strike. "Stop! Let him go!" Edward's voice cracked, desperation exploding from him. He reached the figure just as Luke's tiny hands grasped for his father. Samuel was right beside him, eyes fierce and unwavering. But before anyone could react, the man holding Luke pulled out a small device and pressed a button. A loud beeping began. A rapid series of blips that set Edward's skin on fire with panic. "What have you done?" Edward shouted, dread settling in like a heavy weight. The man laughed, a dark, chilling sound. "You'll find out soon enough." Every second stretched, the beeping growing more frantic. Samuel's eyes widened as he recognized the device. "Get back! Everyone, get back!" he bellowed, pushing Edward behind him, forming an instinctive barrier between Luke and potential destruction. But that voice, Edward froze. It struck a chord, sending ripples of recognition sweeping through him. In that moment, a memory surged back. A child standing in the shadows of a dimly lit room. A face shrouded in light, orphaned and desperate. Samuel's face. Youthful eyes sparkling with a sense of mischief. "You know him," Edward's voice shook as he finally grasped the whispers of the past. You're connected." It all flashed back. Years of secrecy. A family ripped apart. A brother's betrayal. But just as clarity emerged, the man holding Luke grinned wider, a manic energy radiating from him. "What will you do, Edward? Your precious bond can't save the child now. Did you think you could hide everything from me?" And just like that, the device erupted into a blinding flash, the world turning white for a heart-stopping moment. Edward's palms went numb. His heart echoed in his ears. The crowd scattered, screams rising, bodies colliding in chaos. When the light subsided, everything felt eerily quiet. Edward blinked, incredulous and sweating, searching for Luke. Panic surged as he registered the missing boy. Had the man slipped away with him? How could this happen, standing amidst the wreckage of confusion? A whisper rose in the air, a sorrowful tone echoing through the night. "Edward, you need to see this." Samuel stood frozen at Edward's side, trembling as their eyes locked. "I thought you were safe." Each word hung thick with desperation. Edward's heart pounded painfully, the truth clawing to the surface. And there, amid the wreckage, the realization smacked him harder than any blow. Samuel was not just tied to the past. It was the crux of all their futures. Suddenly, Edward saw shadows darting away. Of a child, of a figure. The cold truth sunk deep as he whispered, "What have you done, Samuel?" And just like that, the walls began to tremble. A storm brewing in the distance. One that would reshape everything they had ever known. The street's cold wind howled outside the mansion's grand windows as Edward stood, trapped between fear and curiosity. Samuel's steady gaze met his, filled with an unspoken challenge. Would he choose to forge a connection that stirred his heart, or retreat into the safety of his world, blind to the suffering nestled in the shadows? Before Edward could respond, a distant siren pierced the air, a wailing cry echoing through the city, trembling through the silence that had settled between them. It grew louder, clawing at his spine. Suddenly, there was a frantic knock on the front door, sharp and urgent. Edward's heart raced. Who could it be? He stepped toward the door, dread pooling in his stomach. With each step, the air thickened, charged with unnameable tension. He opened the door to find a breathless woman, eyes wide and frantic, Lucy's mother, skating on the edge of collapse. Her hands shook as she clutched a crumpled envelope, her voice unsteady. "Edward, you have to see this!" "What's wrong?" he asked, worry twisting his features. "It's about Samuel. You need to read this!" Edward took the envelope, half-heartedly unchecking their fragile new bond with the man he'd just met. But as he pulled out the letter, it felt heavier, like it carried more than just paper. Scanning the words, confusion turned into cold shock. His eyes widened, heart hammering in his chest as he absorbed the lines. The letter unveiled Samuel's past, not just riddled with sadness, but draped in unspeakable tragedy. "Samuel," Edward breathed, feeling dizzy. It's true," Lucy's mother cut him off, tears brimming in her eyes. "He's your brother, missing for years." The room spun. A whirling storm of emotions struck. Samuel, this man, with a heart that beat in whispers, was tied to his own blood. Samuel, who laughed with Luke in that alley, was bearing stories Edward had thought long gone. Hope surged, then sank, crashing against desperation. He's been out there, lost, for so long. Cries rang through the air, snatching Edward from his thoughts. "Luke!" His son was crying, confusion spilling from him like water from a broken jug. Edward turned just in time to see Samuel kneeling by Luke, eyes fierce, like he was trying to anchor the boy to reality, while the truth hung suspended in the air. Then it happened. The ground trembled, shaking. A loud bang echoed through the mansion. Glass shattered as chaos broke loose. Edward's heart raced. Outside the window, flames lit the sky. Nearby buildings were ablaze. Panic erupted in the streets. A loud explosion split the air, followed by screams. The world outside had turned into a living nightmare, but inside, real disaster unfurled between Edward and Samuel. Samuel's gaze caught Edward's, a storm of emotion flashing across his face. Fear, anger, resignation. In that moment, everything changed. What had they just learned? How fragile was the bond between them? Edward's breath caught. The truth of this connection was like a fresh wound, aching and raw. And in the face of this disaster breaking loose outside, and perhaps inside as well, what could they do? Could resolving their tangled past save them from this new, terrifying reality? The air was thick with danger and uncertainty. Would Edward grasp the future being offered? Or would the flames outside consume everything they held dear? The city held its breath. And so did they. The streets' cold wind howled outside the mansion's grand windows as Edward stood, caught between what he thought he knew and the harsh reality breathing beside him. Just as he wrestled with his thoughts, a deep crash echoed through the hallway. Samuel's eyes shot wide, and Edward's heart raced. "What was that?" Edward gasped, his voice rising as he turned toward the sound. The door slammed open, and a group of men charged in, faces rough, eyes dark, intentions clear. Their clothes were shadowed, like they walked out of a storm. Edward felt a knot tightening in his stomach. "Get away from him!" Edward shouted, instinctively positioning himself between Samuel and the intruders. The air crackled with tension, electricity zinging through each breath. Samuel's calm facade dropped an inch, revealing a flicker of fear that Edward had never seen before. The leader of the group stepped forward, a man with a jagged scar across his cheek, menacing and close enough to smell the smoke of trouble on his breath. "You've got something that belongs to us, Samuel," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're in over your head. Time to pay your debts." Confusion crashed over Edward like waves, but Samuel's gaze darted to the floor, his shoulders sagging. "I owe nothing to them," he whispered, but the quiver in his voice said otherwise. Edward's heart pounded louder, each thud echoing in his ears. The realization hit like a punch. What Samuel had been hiding, the secrets locked behind his tired eyes, were darker than he could have imagined. He wasn't just a wanderer. He was a man running from a past that threatened to swallow him whole. "What debts?" Edward demanded, his voice rough. "Who are you?" "Just a reminder of the past, Mr. Perfect," the scarred man scoffed, stepping closer until he towered over them like a storm cloud. "He belongs to us. We don't take kindly to people trying to hide." Every word was a dagger, each syllable designed to hurt. "Don't know him," Edward spat, but doubt fluttered like birds in his chest. Everything he thought he knew about Samuel, his strength, his story, cracked like porcelain. Who was this man teaching his son to find his voice? Suddenly, the scarred man lunged, grabbing Samuel by the collar, lifting him off the ground like a rag doll. "You think you can just disappear? We will find you. Mark my words." Edward's blood boiled. He felt powerless, anger coursing through him with fire. "Let him go!" His voice boomed, a punchy command against the chaos. Edward leaped forward, fists clenched, but Samuel's eyes pierced through him. "No," Samuel breathed, a heavy weight in his voice. "Edward, don't. They'll hurt you." Tension cracked like thunder as Edward's world spun. Samuel wasn't just a victim. He was part of something massive, a dark underbelly that Edward had never seen. The pieces of the puzzle fell wildly out of place. Ties he'd never imagined bound them together, dragging everything he knew through deep, uncharted waters. Luke, wide-eyed, stood frozen in the chaos, the innocent laugh replaced by a confusion that twisted with fear. "Daddy," he whispered. "Run!" Edward shouted. But as those words escaped, the room seemed to freeze. The air thickened with uncertainty, each moment stretching into an eternity. In that space of heartbeats, the walls of Edward's world began to crumble. What other truths lay hidden beneath Samuel's skin? What had he sacrificed to survive? And as the shadows of danger thickened, would their newfound bonds survive the storm ahead? The city held its breath, and so did Edward. Caught between his world and Samuel's, Edward felt a storm brewing inside him. The chill from outside seeped into the room, every breath mingling with uncertainty. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the street. Edward and Samuel turned, hearts racing, as they caught a glimpse of something unfolding outside the grand windows. People screamed, Shouts filled the air like boiling water spilling over. A bright flash illuminated the dark sky. Then a deafening explosion rocked the ground beneath them. Edward's heart dropped. He rushed to the window, eyes wide in disbelief. Outside, chaos erupted. Smoke billowed from a nearby building. Shattered glass rained down like confetti mixed with fear. Panic spread like wildfire, and people ran in every direction. Edward's heart hammered in his chest. "What's happening?" he whispered, barely forming words. Samuel moved beside him, calm in the chaos. But Edward could see the flicker of worry in his eyes. "It's just a building, right?" Edward tried to convince himself, but deep down, unease curled tightly in his gut. A siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. But then Samuel's expression shifted. His steady gaze turned to dread. "Edward, I have to tell you something," he said, voice shaking slightly. A thunderous noise filled the air, as another explosion echoed down the street, this time knocking them slightly off balance. Samuel grabbed Edward's arm, urgency flooding his tone. "It's about my past, about your family." Edward felt the weight of Samuel's words press against his chest, his breath hitching in his throat. "What could you possibly know about my family?" he shot back defensively. The city outside continued to collapse, but his world felt as if it was shattering even more heavily. "Your name, it's not just any name," Samuel said, locking eyes with Edward. "You didn't just stumble upon me that day. You were searching for me." "Searching for what?" Edward demanded, his voice rising over the noise. Samuel's eyes were wide, pleading. "For the truth. I'm your brother, Edward, your long-lost brother." The world faded into a blur as Edward stumbled back, shock grounding him in place. He collided with the wall, heart pounding. "What? No, that can't be!" But Samuel pressed on, desperation spilling from him. "I was taken as a child, raised in a different world, but you were always meant to find me. Something terrible happened. You were born before me, but it's all connected. Our family, there are secrets that run deep." Edward's mind raced. Images of a life he thought he knew began to unravel. "No, this can't be," he started, but Samuel's voice cut through the chaos. "Your father wasn't who you think. There's a darkness in our blood, a history that needs to be uncovered," Samuel urged, urgency creeping in. Before Edward could respond, another explosion rattled the ground, sending a wave of heat through the open window. People screamed, and a fire broke out, illuminating their shocked faces. Edward froze, the implication of Samuel's words settling heavily in his mind. Could it be true? As the chaos outside escalated, Edward felt the ground slip away. "You're lying!" he yelled. But even as he said it, doubt clawed at him. Samuel remained steadfast, his voice firm, piercing through the uncertainty. "The truth will change everything." The world spun, every truth and lie mixing like smoke in the air. Edward wondered, where would this revelation lead him? Could he trust Samuel? Or was he spiraling into a darkness he wasn't ready to face? The flames danced as they flickered, reflecting the turmoil within. Both men stood at the threshold of a revelation that could destroy them or bind them together. What would happen next? Ha 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 ha! The city held its breath, waiting for the answer to explode. Caught between his world and Samuel's, Edward felt a storm brewing inside him. The chill from outside seeped into the room, every breath mingling with uncertainty. Just ha 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 ha! Then a loud crash echoed from the street. Edward and Samuel turned, hearts racing as they caught a glimpse of something unfolding outside the grand windows. People screamed, shouts filled the air like boiling water spilling over. A bright flash illuminated the dark sky. Then a deafening explosion rocked the ground beneath them. Edward's heart dropped. He rushed to the window, eyes wide in disbelief. Outside, chaos erupted. Smoke billowed from a nearby building. Shattered glass rained down like confetti mixed with fear. Panic spread like wildfire, and people ran in every direction. Edward's heart hammered in his chest. "What's happening?" he whispered, barely forming words. Samuel moved beside him, calm in the chaos. Shh! But Edward could see the flicker of worry in his eyes. "It's just a building, right?" Edward tried to convince himself, but deep down, unease coiled tightly in his gut. A siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. But then Samuel's expression shifted. His steady gaze turned to dread. "Edward, I have to tell you something," he said, voice shaking slightly. A thunderous noise filled the air as another explosion echoed down the street, knocking them slightly off balance. Samuel grabbed Edward's arm, urgency flooding his tone. "It's about my past, about your family." Edward felt the weight of Samuel's words press against his chest, his breath hitching in his throat. "What could you possibly know about my family?" he shot back defensively. The city outside continued to collapse, but his world felt as if it were shattering, even more heavily. "Your name. It's not just any name," Samuel said, locking eyes with Edward. "You didn't just stumble upon me that day. You were searching for me." "Searching? For what?" Edward demanded, his voice rising over the noise. Samuel's eyes were wide, pleading. "For the truth. I'm your brother, Edward. Your long-lost brother." The world faded into a blur as Edward stumbled back, shock grounding him in place. He collided with the wall, heart pounding. "What? No, that can't be." But Samuel pressed on, desperation spilling from him. "I was taken as a child, raised in a different world. But you were always meant to find me. Something terrible happened. You were born before me, but it's all connected. Our family, there are secrets that run deep." Edward's mind raced. Images of a life he thought he knew began to unravel. "No, this can't be," he started, but Samuel's voice cut through the chaos. "Your father wasn't who you think. There's a darkness in our blood, a history that needs to be uncovered," Samuel urged, urgency creeping in. Before Edward could respond, another explosion rattled the ground, sending a wave of heat through the open window. People screamed and a fire broke out, illuminating their shocked faces. Edward froze, the implication of Samuel's words settling heavily in his mind. Could it be true? As the chaos outside escalated, Edward felt the ground slip away. "You're lying!" he yelled. But even as he said it, doubt clawed at him, Samuel remained steadfast, his voice firm, piercing through the uncertainty. The truth will change everything. The world spun, every truth and lie mixing like smoke in the air. Edward wondered, where would this revelation lead him? Could he trust Samuel? Or was he spiraling into a darkness he wasn't ready to face? The flames danced as they flickered, reflecting the turmoil within. Both men stood at the threshold of a revelation that could destroy them or bind them together. Suddenly a loud crash interrupted the moment. The entire building shuddered, and from the corner of the window, Edward saw something that made his blood run cold. A familiar black car, the same one their father drove into the night years ago, was parked menacingly outside, its engine purring like a predator. His breath hitched. "That car! It's Dad's!" Edward murmured, horror slicing through him. Samuel turned, eyes wide with realization. "No, it can't be!" But before he could finish, a tall figure emerged from the shadows, wearing a long coat and an expression that rippled with authority. "Father?" Edward breathed, disbelief crashing over him, like a wave. But the man who stepped into the light wasn't the father he remembered. He was older, his face shadowed with secrets. Samuel recoiled beside him, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Leave now," the man commanded, voice cold. "This isn't your battle anymore." Edward's heart raced, pulse pounding in his ears. "What do you want from us?" he yelled, desperation creeping in. "What have you been hiding?" The man smirked, a chilling grin that sent shivers down Edward's spine. "Your brother has quite a history, doesn't he? Perhaps it's time you both learned it firsthand." The walls shook again. Samuel stepped forward, fists clenched. "You think you can scare us? You think you still have power over me?" And in that moment, it clicked. Samuel wasn't just the story of a lost brother. He was also the key to a legacy of darkness that chained them all. The implications twisted like thorns, digging deep. "Secrets come with a price, Edward," the man said, voice laced with menace. "And you're about to pay. Prepare for the truth." As the building shuddered and the air thickened, the truth loomed larger than ever. The city outside held its breath, but inside, the revelation lingered like a storm cloud, ominous and unyielding. What else lay hidden beneath this newfound connection? And would Edward ever escape the shadow of his father's past? The walls shook again. Another explosion rattling the windows like a warning. Edward felt his heart race like a jackhammer pounding in his chest. The man standing before them, his father, held an air of authority and danger that crackled in the thickening atmosphere. Samuel tensed beside him, feet planted firmly, as if waiting for a storm to break. "Prepare for the truth," the man said, an unsettling smile spreading across his face, filled with a past he was desperate to share. "Don't!" Samuel shouted suddenly, voice rising above the chaos. "Please, don't do this! Don't drag him into this nightmare!" But the man only chuckled darkly, taking a step closer, his presence pressing down on both Edward and Samuel. "You think you can protect your brother, The truth will come out one way or another. Then, without warning and with an unsettling swiftness, the room plunged into darkness. The flickering bulbs overhead died like a candle snuffed out, and the chaos resumed outside. Edward could hear shouts of fear and confusion echoing off the mansion's walls. An icy grip clenched around his throat. "Samuel, what do you know?" Edward asked, holding on to Samuel's gaze. Searching for grounding. Then, beneath the din, a voice emerged, high and clear, piercing through the dread. "Father, let him go!" Both men turned. Edward's eyes widened as he recognized the voice. It was Lucy, the girl from the alley. She rushed into view, fear lighting up her features, her hands raised in desperation. "Don't do this! You can't!" "Lucy!" Edward called out, panic rising. "Get back!" But before anyone could react, the scene twisted. Lucy glanced frantically at Edward, then at Samuel, and her words tumbled out. "It's been a lie, all of it. I had to find you, Samuel. I had to save you." "What are you talking about?" Edward asked, his voice a mix of confusion and anger. "Samuel isn't just your brother. He's been hiding from more than just our family," she said, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "He's the heir." "The heir to what?" Edward demanded. And then Lucy's eyes locked into his, a deep sadness in them. "Your father isn't just a businessman. He's part of a hidden empire, a criminal syndicate. And Samuel," she hesitated, the weight of her words hanging heavy between them. "He's the one they hope to use to regain control." The very air crackled as realization dropped like a stone into silence. Samuel stepped back, eyes wide. "No, that's not true." But the fear in his voice felt like a warning. "And if you don't step up, they'll come for you both," Lucy continued, tears filling her eyes. "They'll do anything to keep you from escaping my father, my family, all for the same reason." "Lucy, no!" Samuel whispered, the colour draining from his face. Just then, a loud crash shattered the tension, drawing their eyes to the entrance. More figures stormed in, urgency and panic written across their faces. "They're coming!" a newcomer shouted. "We have to move now!" Edward's heart hammered, every instinct screaming at him to run. "What about Luke?" He turned to look for his son, who stood petrified in the corner, eyes wide with terror. "Stay back!" Edward yelled, desperately trying to shield Samuel and Lucy with his body. But it was too late. One of the intruders lunged forward, grabbing Lucy, pulling her from the room. "Let her go!" Samuel cried out, reaching for her. But just as Lucy was about to be dragged away, she turned, eyes wild with fear and urgency. "You have to trust me. Don't let them take you." Everything spun. Confusion morphed into chaos as the captured girl glanced back at Edward, her words like a haunting whisper, echoing in his mind. As the door slammed shut behind Lucy, sealing her fate, Edward felt the ground beneath him shift. He turned to Samuel, every fibre of his being trembling with doubt. What the hell is going on? And as Samuel looked back, the fear in his eyes mirrored Edward's own. "I don't know, but we have to figure this out before it's too late." The shadows in the room deepened, closing around them like a dark, suffocating blanket. The night held its breath, and Edward knew that this revelation reshaped everything. The truth lay buried, waiting to explode. What else had been hidden in the darkness? The air was electric with unknown danger. and the city beyond seemed to scream for resolution. Yet all that hung over them was uncertainty. The room trembled with fear and confusion. Edward felt the weight of his father's presence pressing down on him. Each moment stretched, filled with the echo of chaos from outside. Samuel stood firm beside him, ready to confront whatever. Darkness loomed ahead. "Enough of this!" Edward shouted, taking a step forward. "You've controlled our lives for too long. Samuel deserves the truth." Their father's smirk faded, replaced by cold fury. "You know nothing of the real world, Edward. You both are just pawns in a game you can't even comprehend." But before he could react further, an unexpected flicker of hope surged through the chaos. Voices erupted outside. More figures captured by the turmoil. Were they friends? Allies? Or just more threats? "Run!" Lucy's voice pierced through the din, followed by the sound of feet pounding against the mansion's marble floor. "We have to get out now!" The door swung open, and mob-like crowds rushed in, eyes wild, faces desperate. People flung themselves toward Edward, Samuel, and their father. Each welcoming figure clutched urgent messages, frantic shouts competing in a whirlwind of sound. "Look out!" someone yelled. Suddenly, flames flickered behind them, casting long shadows in every direction. Edward felt the heat creeping closer. Panic crashed around him. "Samuel, we need to go!" But Samuel stood his ground, eyes fierce. "Edward, I can't leave him. Not yet." "Leave him? He's the monster!" Edward's stomach twisted as dread coursed through him. "He'll ruin everything!" But as Samuel moved closer to their father, something shifted. Realization struck. Samuel wasn't just confronting their family's dark legacy. He was ready to claim his power. With every breath, the past collided with the present, and they stood on the precipice of everything they feared. "Your shadow means nothing," their father spat, a vile hiss tainting his words. "You think you can escape this life? You're done running, Samuel." Just as despair threatened to engulf them, Lucy stepped forward, face resolute. "This isn't just your battle anymore. We're all in this together." Edward felt fire erupt in him. The bond with Samuel, with Lucy, had ignited something deep inside. "You're wrong. We are more than pawns. We are brothers. We can take this back." At that moment, the ground shifted again. The flames grew stronger, roaring like a living thing. Shadows danced as the walls trembled, and from the corner of his eye, Edward caught a glimpse of Luke, small and frightened. "Daddy!" The boy's voice trembled, piercing through the chaos. In an instant, Edward sprinted toward him, heart racing. "Luke, I'm here!" But just as he reached the door, their father lunged in front of him, blocking the exit. "You can't save him, Edward. You will never escape this." Without hesitation, fueled by fear and determination, Edward shoved his father aside, adrenaline surging. Just as he reached for Luke, Samuel took his stance beside him, glancing back at the chaos that unfolded behind them. "Let's show them who we are," Samuel whispered. Fire blazing in his eyes, the two men charged forward, slicing through the tumbling fear as they grabbed hold of Luke. They bolted through the door, leaving the suffocating shadows behind. Edward felt that pulse of freedom as hope surged through him. Outside, the air was thick with tension. But they had each other. Sirens wailed in the distance, and men and women fought against the raging chaos. They were part of something bigger, a whole community rising against the darkness that had hunted them for too long. As they sprinted through the streets, Samuel turned to Edward, a glimmer of resolution in his eyes. "This is just the beginning," he said. "I'm ready," Edward replied, knowing that their bond was stronger than their past. But as they turned the corner, a new threat loomed. Shadows drifted in the alleys. Someone was watching. Something was following. The story was far from over. Before you go, you have to subscribe now. Don't wait a single second longer to be part of this journey. Smash that like button. Every push feeds the algorithm and sends this message out to more people. Flood the comments with your thoughts and reactions. And let's keep this conversation going. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to witness this ending. You won't regret it. Your support is what keeps these stories alive.